One hit wonder, man.
One hit wonder. What's happening, Reject Nation? I'm Greg Alba.
I'm John Humphrey. Hi guys, I'm PJ Campbell. Thanks for
PJ
having me back.
Campbell from the PJ Campbell Show. I went on his podcast. Go check it out. Ask PJ to guest star with us today here on this specific fun video podcast we are doing. Hopefully you guys like what we have to say. Words. We're going to talk today, one of our top reward tiers, whatever video you request us do and put up on the YouTubes. And today comes from a man named Michael B. Omni One Media. Go check his YouTube channel out. He had an interesting topic for us to dissect a little bit here. I wish we had notes for this, but we don't need notes.
No,
We're
goddamn right we don't.
Buffs.
We don't need no stinking notes.
We have thoughts.
We are very smart men with very smart opinions.
As long as we're honest, that's what counts.
Exactly.
I think Louis C.K. deserves a second.
I think that Lost is one of the best series finales of all time. When's Red Sonja coming out, guys?
Last Jedi was the best and worst Star Wars movie ever made.
And we just lost most of the audience.
Damn it.
God damn.
I shouldn't have been honest about honest things that people honest.
He needs more blankets and he needs less blankets.
Louis C.K. should take some more time away and really heal.
A lot more time.
Change as a human first.
I still like the Lost finale.
You can do that in like 6 months.
But you were sincere about that.
I am. I'm sincere. I do like the Lost
Anyway,
finale.
the topic that Michael B. has for us is basically talking about if a franchise has had quite a bit of a break, if they should come back with a sequel or if they should reboot it altogether, what our general opinion is on that. He was referencing films like how they're talking about maybe doing Austin Powers 4 or Rush Hour 4 as opposed to rebooting it. And my take on this is pretty simple now that I actually put some thought into it.
Case by case basis.
Kind of. It depends on how strongly associated you are with the actors. It primarily comes actually down to the actors more than anything else. Is how much do you associate the actors and characters with that franchise, or is it something where you, because like with Bond, we just did a whole podcast about Bond and whatnot, but I think that with something like I was saying that Mission Impossible cannot continue without Tom Cruise. I'll say this: if Mission Impossible took a 15 to 20 year break, you could continue it without Tom Cruise. Sure. I wouldn't be like, why is an 80-year-old Tom Cruise in the role? Fuck this movie. I'd be like, no, you get someone else, some whatever actors want to do crazy stunts now, and fucking throw them in there. Sure, why not? If it had like a couple decades of a break. But then there are movies like Austin Powers. I'm like, no, don't do an Austin Powers reboot. You would need Mike Myers for that.
Isn't that his character too? Like,
yeah,
I don't think he even,
characters.
Well, yeah, it's like that's a case where I don't think he even like auditioned to play that. Like that, he created that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, he like ups the ante each one. He was always there's another character he added to it. So I think if you were to just same thing with Rush Hour, you know, the TV show didn't pass. Did you see the TV show?
Yeah, it was awful. And I'm a big Bill Lawrence fan. He created Scrubs and Spin City. Rush Hour did not work as a TV show.
This because the dynamic, like the one that surprised me, the feedback I heard off this show, that I haven't seen it because I was so opposed against it, but people loved it. It was Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, you know what? And
Crawford.
I can actually say that because I was one of the people who, if you guys, they've known me long enough, I was very against the Lethal Weapon reboot. Because for me, Lethal Weapon was singularly Danny Glover and Mel Gibson for so long. But the one thing I will say, regardless of what happened behind the scenes with Clayne Crawford and Damon Wayans Jr., or Damon Wayans Sr., I should say, right?
Yeah.
Whichever one it is.
Yeah, he's senior.
Yeah, senior. They were really good together. Their chemistry was great, and they brought something to the roles that I hadn't thought you could do outside of them. But at the same time, Lethal Weapon to me will still always predominantly be the movies.
And I feel like you might be able to get away with it better if you reboot it in a different format, a different medium, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think Rush Hour actually could have succeeded as a TV show because it's a different medium. If they were to do the movies, much more harder to wrap your brain around.
Well, and it's kind of interesting because you bring up Lethal Weapon, and that's one of those movies that we're continually hearing that WB is really trying to grind away at potentially doing a 5th movie, especially with Mel Gibson kind of coming back in the light now as an actor and a filmmaker. Danny Glover's not doing a whole lot outside of the Badass movies or whatever those are with Danny Trejo. Like, those guys aren't doing a ton, and nostalgia's all the rage right now. And that's really where this question is coming from, is the idea of nostalgia and the sequels that we're pulling from.
Good point.
And so if you're going to do a Lethal Weapon movie, you might as well do it with them. Because if you're doing the movie, it has to be them.
Yeah, especially that's what I mean.
It's the characters.
It's different
it's the
mediums.
actors.
Nostalgia, a lot comes to play into it. And if you're going to do a part 5, might as well. I feel like for the longest time I've had a Lethal Weapon 5 idea.
You have.
And you just got to start off where Murtaugh is retired and he is too old for this shit now. And something leads. I feel like there's an easy segue and a fun way to get back into it. But generally speaking, it really does come down to. It really just does come down to that, and especially if it's a duo type of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like. I don't. How do you personally feel about the Ghostbusters reboot?
So personally, when it comes to the Ghostbusters reboot, I wasn't a fan of it. Not because I don't think. It's not that I don't like the movie itself. I actually like the movie as its own thing. The biggest problem is that when they came back with it, if you're gonna do a movie that is so beloved, the Ghostbusters, you need to at least acknowledge the world that it happened and exists. And I think that the biggest problem, and especially in a world where Force Awakens exists and Jurassic World exists, we are coming back to these worlds in a time where time has passed, but it's a familiar world. You know, the things that we know happen still. You don't necessarily have to have the characters, and I think the biggest problem with Ghostbusters as a movie was that by not acknowledging the original events happened, but then you bring the other cast members back.
Like they remake.
Their
and you're
intent
remaking
became confusing.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people, or at least my experience, was sitting there going, "Wait, is this supposed to be connected or not?" I mean, Bill Murray's a different guy, I guess. You know,
but then they made callback jokes,
yeah.
and it's very confusing. And because of that, that movie lost its own identity because it didn't have an identity.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we were all under the impression it was going to be a soft reboot, and it wasn't a soft reboot. It was a straight up remake. And I think your safest bet, if actors are too old, is usually a soft reboot as your safest bet. But sometimes that might not even work. Like, I think of like Independence Day 2.
What?
When you like soft reboot
that one hurt a lot, man.
That was a bad
awful
movie. That was like real. I watched it many years after, like, I don't know, 2 years, not many years, like 2 years after it came out, and I heard how terrible it was, and I watched that, and I was like, oh wow, this is just as bad as everyone made it out to be. Yeah.
It was really, really bad.
But that whole thing with like passing down the a lot of people are excited for this next Ghostbusters movie, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not. I'm not looking forward to the fandom response to it. B, I'm like, whoa, how do we know it's going to be anything good? We need a real trailer first to know, is this another passing the mantle thing? Because that's what it sounds like to me. And that usually doesn't pan out pretty well.
Well, this is the hard part, is I feel like whenever you approach one of these kinds of things, it's been a while, we got to make another. I think the first question you need to ask yourself is, do people love the concept of what this is, or the people involved, and how much do those two things rely upon or intertwine with each other? I know I've harped on Point Break a million times, but Point Break was coming out as a remake, and I was like, nobody loves Point Break because of what the plot is. It's about Keanu Reeves, and it's about Patrick Swayze and Gary Busey and Lori Petty. It's about that. And so, yeah, I feel like you start to, like, Ghostbusters, to me, I feel like you could reboot a million times and it's fine, because that is, we love those characters, but the concept itself is such a lucid thing that it doesn't have to be those characters. And I feel like the mistake they made with the Ghostbusters reboot is like, I thought after so much time, do something new. Don't weigh yourself down necessarily with being beholden to the old movie unless you're going to commit to that.
That's a great point, actually, about the whole concept versus character. Because like, I think that's why Lethal Weapon and Rush Hour, I could fathomably see them getting away with it, because their concepts are... I mean, why it's harder for me to see them getting away with it, because their concepts are not exactly original. What made those franchises work?
Holy shit, buddy cop! Right. It's these buddy cops.
That's true. And that's why, that's actually that's the best way to put it. Is it really comes down to, what made it work? Was it the concept plus characters, or was it only the actors involved playing the characters?
Yeah. And it's interesting because then you look at something like Die Hard, where the concept is great and we like Bruce Willis, but it didn't stop Die Hard 5 from being really, really awful. And now they're talking about that Die Hard Year One prequel, which I don't want a prequel movie, but I don't think Die Hard as a franchise necessarily needs to end without, and I think you could do it without Willis. Someone like Paul Rudd, who's like an everyday kind of guy who ends up in the same situation, and kind of updating it for now might actually work. It just depends on the person you're putting into it, because clearly if Bruce Willis doesn't give a shit about Die Hard at this point, it should go to someone who does.
But do you think, to me, I feel like the Die Hard franchise should stop.
Definitely.
But we also know we live in a world where
it's not going to.
It's not going to.
Yeah.
And you could also make the same application to something like Alien. At this point, Alien is now had the prequel series that clearly has not worked for people on any sort of level. I mean, I may like Prometheus and Covenant for different reasons, but as a whole, audiences didn't react.
But you see, people were at least very interested in Prometheus.
Sure.
Like, Prometheus was a box office hit because of the fact that, like, we all heard that it was an Alien prequel. Yeah. And that comes back to, like, there's no Ellen Ripley, but no one complained about that. It was all about the world and the exploration of that. And, like, as a movie itself, it didn't deliver on that. But what we wanted as audiences was enough to sell us on seeing that movie. But it would be a different story if they were doing Alien 5, Ellen Ripley's in it, but it's not Sigourney Weaver.
And that's actually what I was going to say, is right now, with Alien as a franchise, maybe the worst idea wouldn't be to go back to Alien and kind of do what Halloween did, where...
And kind of get, like, Neil Blomkamp to direct it?
Yeah, and maybe get James Cameron to produce it, you know? I mean,
he could bring back Michael Biehn and Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, I know, right? And then you get someone to be Newt, and she can take over the franchise.
Weird.
Wow, guys, we really...
What happened?
We should leak some concept art.
I know.
We should get some concept art to leak. Get people's hopes up.
And then... Crush them
and then
completely.
shit all over.
And then James Cameron revives those hopes a week ago.
Yeah. Wait, which new set of hopes?
Which
hopes is he getting up of mine now?
If you didn't hear, he is talking to Blomkamp about trying to bring it back.
Alien?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not.
He was talking about it on the Alita red carpet.
Is Ridley Scott gonna let that happen?
I hope Neil.
Let's say at this point. But
Ridley Scott just seems like he has some like ego.
He seems like a controlling.
Shit happened.
He seems like a controlling boyfriend over the Alien franchise. It's
like,
it's my chick.
Everyone forgot that I came up with this. And now I'm gonna just make so many, so everyone associates it with me.
It's my avatar.
Yeah.
Well, look, Ridley, let it go. Just let it go.
For
the sake of all of us, please let it go.
Please let it go, Ridley Scott.
But I will say, it is dependent on what we've been talking about. And you look at Blade Runner. Blade Runner 2049 is one of those things where maybe not a lot of people were asking for a Blade Runner sequel, but they made a movie that worked for a new audience as well as fans. And it's not a easy thing to kind of get on that line, and they made it work.
I feel like for a sequel soft reboot that Blade Runner 2049 was, I wish it was a bigger hit.
Me too.
Yeah.
Because they nailed it.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Like, they fucking... I forgot Harrison Ford was supposed to show up in the movie.
And that's how good that movie is till that point.
That's how good it was. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Harrison Ford being in this until we saw the familiar planet from the trailers. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, that's right. Harrison Ford shows up in this movie. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful synthesis of when those points work correctly. Because it's like you have this world we are enticed by. You have this story, this core story that we're enticed by. And you have Harrison Ford, who is kind of at least synonymous with that movie. He's one of the first things that you think of, and a couple other actors as well. And all of those things come to light in Blade Runner 2049. And that is kind of a great example of how this can work beautifully with all of those elements in line. Because, you know, Harrison Ford's not the point. He's not there for half the movie, but, you know, he's still really compelling when he gets there.
And he's integral, and his storyline is very important in tying the whole movie up.
Right. Whereas, look at Indiana Jones. It might be harder to try to reboot Indiana Jones because we're so tied to Harrison Ford as the character right now.
See, that's what I find fascinating, because when there was all that talk about Chris Pratt, as I was going to bring him up earlier, when they were talking about Chris Pratt possibly taking over, there didn't really seem to be a lot of hate for that.
No.
Which surprised me, because I'm like, I feel like you know, anytime you talk about replacing Harrison Ford for anything, you're like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? But for that specifically, people see. I honestly think Indiana Jones can continue without Harrison Ford, and I don't know. I've read that's a very unpopular opinion.
I kind of agree though.
But there's a world, it's adventure. Indy's not exactly a depth
Mm-hmm.
guy, you know.
Well, and I don't think you're necessarily wrong. We do have to remember there was the TV show. I mean, Sean Patrick Flannery has technically played the role many more times than Harrison Ford actually did. Yeah. And he was quite good in it, and I wouldn't mind seeing someone else take a crack at it. But you also, kind of like what we talked about with Bond, you have to go back. You have to make a period piece.
Well, no, yeah, especially I would think it would be terrible if we did a modern day Indiana Jones.
Well, there's no jungles anymore to go fucking.
He just shows on his phone and looks it up. I found it, guys.
If you
so
want,
take a
I got
photo.
ways. Modern Indiana Jones is just national treasure. We have that movie. Nicolas Cage was in it, and it was great.
Oh man, I would actually love to see a modern, like the great-great-grandson of Indiana Jones. They just keep naming him Indiana Jones.
I'm a Jones.
Yeah. Oh, buddy.
Oh yeah.
Boy.
But see, because Indiana Jones, even though it's such a defining character, the thing is, if any of these franchises, they all have defining characters in there, defining actors portraying those roles. The difference is the concept and world big enough to explore that thing without them. You see, like Han Solo prequel was there's always, this is such a big gray, that's why I thought this would be an interesting talk, because it's such a big gray area.
Yeah.
There's no one answer.
No, every variable matters per project.
Because Solo wasn't a continuation, it was a origin prequel thing. And that's a different topic though. Because I'm like, well, the thing that went wrong there is A, no one really wants to see the origin explored of Han Solo here.
Right.
B, they're not. We just saw Han Solo play him in Force Awakens. We don't want to see another guy play him right now. You know,
so soon.
He's definitely not doing his own thing, but trying to do Harrison Ford. Like that's a completely different type of a conversation.
Sorry, Alden.
I feel bad for the guy.
I do too. I mean that legitimately, because you know what? All things being equal, when it came to Solo, he's not the problem with it. And I
don't think so.
I actually think Solo might be closest to what Lucas would have liked Star Wars to become in a lot of ways.
Totally.
And
It
so
felt like a fan film that was really expensive.
it did. Well, it also felt like a film that no one actually knew what they were trying to do with it. But I mean, Alden at the end of the day kind of got a bad deal. I would like to see him get to play the role again. Maybe Disney Plus could think about it. That would be fine.
Well, and that's, I mean, the cardinal sin that movie it commits is just being kind of middle of the road, being kind of familiar and boilerplating. And I think a big part of the issue with this is also the scripts, and that's a big conundrum to me as well, because coming back after so long, I feel like franchises could do maybe nowadays, depending on which franchise you are, with maybe being a little less beholden to chronology and making sure that things need to fit together. It's like, I feel like you don't have to be episodic but shallow. You could be episodic and go, you know, for broke on telling the story you want to tell this time, and then maybe we could get used to the fact that they don't have to just feed directly into each other. Because part of what, like bringing up the idea of Austin Powers 4 or Rush Hour 4, it's like I find franchises interesting in that both those cases I would say make a sequel, because time has now passed and you get instant development from that. It's like every Evil Dead, we come back to Ash, he's a little older, he's at a different point in his life.
And the thing is, if you don't work with that, it works against the movie. Like that's why I turned off Dumb and Dumber 2. Like
Sure.
I rented Dumb and Dumber is one of my favorite comedies ever. And then I rented Dumb and Dumber 2. I paid fucking money at a goddamn, I had to like physically grab a copy and put it in. And I got like 40 minutes in, and I just turned it off.
I will say that opening joke is amazing in the movie, though.
The one in the trailer?
Yeah.
Okay.
But, I mean, you're not wrong. I'm not disagreeing with you.
I felt like that big thing with that is they just tried making Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey just do what they did 20 years ago. And they didn't take advantage of trying to, like, explore where they really like now. Like, no, the whole joke is they haven't changed one bit, you know?
Right.
And for me personally, I felt like that was a big hindrance towards it. I'm like, on paper, that sounds funny. But like, they haven't changed at all.
But you're staring at them and they have.
I think that it's interesting when you look at Halloween, which came out last year, where that was one of the big things is you cut out everything else, and what happens to Laurie 40 years later? What does that mean to her as a character? Where do you find her now? What did the events of that night do to her? And
that's kind of why I'm looking forward to the next Terminator movie.
Yeah.
Is for that Sarah Connor element. I have no clue what they're doing with Arnold. It sounds so confusing what they've been saying.
I don't even care at this point. I just kind of want to see it.
Don't think too hard about that time travel stuff. It fries your mind.
Well, that was a movie line.
It's a several movies
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Line. If you do any time travel plot now, somebody says that, and we don't have any questions.
Well, that's the thing I'm curious about the most with this is there even time travel involved with Terminator? And Terminator is another example of what we've been talking about, where you're cutting out a lot of what happened and you're doing a movie that's so many years later and you're catching up with Sarah Connor now. And if Judgment Day is technically never happened, does John Connor still become the savior of humanity? What does that do to those characters?
Yeah.
That's a very interesting thing to kind of explore.
Well, I've always thought, I mean, this is a really big side tangent. I've always thought it would be a kind of a cool John Connor graphic novel to do if you dealt with the idea that whoever the kid is that Sarah Connor is pregnant with at the end of Terminator 1 is probably not the same John Connor.
Who sent him?
Who sent him back because it makes no sense in time frame wise because Kyle Reese was obviously born after John Connor because he has this whole thing of like, yeah, John Connor was my mentor, you know? And then he goes back and impregnates Sarah Connor. So she just named some kid John Connor and put all this mantle shit on him. But that's not the same John Connor at all. You know?
We should make that into a comedy. And like the feeling of John Connor. Yeah, where this kid is like, I've been told I'm supposed to be the savior of humanity, but I just like flip burgers.
Somewhere on an alternate timeline. Because this begs the question of, okay, was there a first time he got sent back or did it always happen? But yeah, if you did like
it makes no sense.
It never will. But if you do an alternate timeline where he just got the bad genes and he's kind of uncoordinated and kind of a dweeb and, you know, he's thrust with this world savior, you know, thing, that could be really fun. You could get a fish out of water.
You know, if Skydance or anyone over there wants to contact us, we would be willing to make this into a sitcom.
That's how you brighten up the Terminator franchise. Go comedy.
Yeah,
go sci-fi comedy with it.
I think time allotted to has a big difference to do. Like, I think with Genesis, when that came out, honestly, when I saw the trailers, I wasn't like, fuck this movie. I didn't feel that way when I saw that trailer. And I wasn't upset about the recasting of Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton. Like, that didn't upset me. I wasn't like, I'm married to those performances so heavily, even though I think Linda Hamilton is insanely incredible in Terminator 1 and especially Terminator 2. I wasn't upset by it because so much time has passed, you know? And it was a different kind, and because Terminator lends itself to a world where you can do that. But yeah, I think time has a lot to do with, like, to me, Ghostbusters, of getting the original guys back, I'm like, I feel like Bill Murray is the only one you could potentially be looking forward to, but do I really give a shit about Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson coming back?
No.
Do I really care about that?
And you know that Bill Murray doesn't care that much to show
we
up.
know Bill Murray just doesn't give a shit about anything anymore.
Yeah, he just
Dan
doesn't
Aykroyd is kind of just this weird now.
He has Crystal Skull vodka.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
That's true.
And Ernie Hudson always got the short end of the stick in those Ghostbusters movies, you know? He was always just kind of pushed to the back.
I still have hope for the new one because I think that between Ivan Reitman's son coming in and having Jason Reitman, like, kind of take his own crack at something that he was so passionately a part of as a kid, and to try to capitalize on that now is very interesting. And I don't necessarily mind the idea of it kind of having a Stranger Things vibe with the kids front and center. It's just all going to be dependent on how it's handled.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we've been talking about with this whole thing. And one thing I wanted to go back to real quick that you had brought up with the serialization is we kind of saw with Aquaman, one of the things that DC tried to do really with that film was do a movie that went for broke. It wasn't necessarily tied to everything else that was going on. And DC's in a weird place right now where Justice League was financially a disaster. Affleck's out as Batman. Cavill's probably out as Superman. What do you do with those characters? Are you going to reboot them within this timeline? What are you going to do now? And it's a tough place to be when Wonder Woman was successful and Aquaman was successful and Shazam looks like it's going to be successful and you're making another movie with Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really matter how much time is passing at this point. it just becomes, just tell me the story. I don't really care about the continuity.
Well, universe building is a whole other category.
And I feel like and I feel like Amazing Spider-Man destroyed the time we should wait barrier by coming out like 4 years later or something like that. Like there are no rules now in terms of when you can do all this. I do, see, I'm curious as to what's going to happen to the DCEU just because, right now their foundation is such a mess, and certain key elements are going to stay the same, and some are going to change, and in like 15, 20 years, people are going to watch Man of Steel and start this journey and get real confused.
Okay, let's just talk for like 3 more minutes. So I'm going to quickly type in on here, upcoming sequels, reboots,
let's see what this is.
2019. Let's see what we got here.
Sequels, remakes, reboots, prequels, and spin-offs.
Okay. So many coming up.
Oh, we got the Addams Family.
Okay, there's another Halloween. Oh, Top Gun Maverick. You see Top Gun Maverick, that makes perfect sense to me that you would get Tom Cruise back because we all see he's alive and kicking like nobody's business.
Well, and not just that, the idea of what would have happened to him in a kind of a time when drone fighting and stuff has become popular. What does that do to someone like him?
Yeah.
Someone whose literally his life revolved around flying planes.
Untitled Indiana Jones. Yeah, they've been talking about that Indiana Jones shit for a long time.
Yeah. They're going to keep talking about it.
Like Bad Boys is a great example of what we're talking about. You need Martin Lawrence and Will Smith.
Yep.
You can't do without
Absolutely.
them.
And Michael Bay.
Not LA's finest, the cheap, what is it, Spectrum show, spinoff with Gabrielle.
Like Men in Black International, I think was a really poor trailer. I did not care. I thought that trailer was very lackluster. Especially because I'm like, you're not introducing anything new to me when you got a whole universe at your disposal. Yeah, and they're soft rebooting that because it did show J and K and the painting there. And to me, I feel like you can do that without Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones.
Well, and that comes down to the cast you get and the people involved, and they got a good cast for it on top of it.
And that's something that has like a source material that it was adapted from too, so you have that kind of baseline to plug and play with, I feel like, whereas if it had been a movie first, we might be a little more conflicted. But
there's one I just saw that as you were scrolling is Coming to America 2, and that's one where I'm really hesitant to get excited because Eddie Murphy's career clearly right now has not been the best, and it feels like he's going really hard trying to do something that we all love, but comedy sequels are notoriously hard to do. Yeah. And was anyone really clamoring for a Coming to America sequel 30 years later?
I don't think anyone's. No. I think that's the kind of thing you hear and go, "What?"
Yeah,
and maybe now I'm excited, but I had no idea. You know?
Well, they were always talking about Beverly Hills Cop 4 and stuff. Well, the thing is like these nostalgia-based comedies always try to capture the same. Like comedies evolve so much, and what we find funny and amusing there was times where the Judd Apatow comedies were the thing. And now we're going into more genre-based comedies. I noticed that people are really gravitating more towards things like Game Night or Tag.
Oh, yeah.
Things that mix genres and have an actual, tight edit and tight script. And not just, let's let them fucking improvise,
People got tired of their 2-hour and 15-minute comedies.
Well, and it's funny because in the 80s, like Coming to America was one of those that kind of did do there is a little bit of improv. Ghostbusters did the same thing, but it still feels like a tight edit.
Yeah.
And then
it feels like here's a line or two to improv, not like, okay, here's what this whole sequence of scenes might be about. Go.
Yeah.
Rambo's another one because Rambo comes out later this year, Last Blood. To know Stallone was still out there, we've seen him clearly doing action movies and stuff lately. It makes sense to bring him back to do one more.
I think it also a lot of this also comes down to with the character and actor associated with it. Because Stallone's so associated with Rambo, and I have a whole thing where I think you can reboot First Blood actually, because
absolutely.
The book is so different and it's so much more in depth. And it was the original cut of First Blood was like 3 hours long because they took a lot from the book and they just kind of trimmed out a shit ton of stuff.
Release the book cut
to make it release the book cut. Yeah. So I feel like because that was more of like a war veteran movie tale instead of they made like a crisp 80s action movie.
That wouldn't be a bad one to do an update on. To do it now.
Oh, I think so. Oh, yeah. I First Blood. But I think if you're going to continue Rambo, like continue the franchise, then
it's got to be Stallone.
Because I also think a lot has to do with where are we at with the mind? What's audience's association with the actors now?
Sure.
Today, like Lethal Weapon 5 sounds a little bit weird to me because I'm like, those guys are so old, you know. Like,
Well, and Gibson's not the most favorite.
yeah, he's not exactly sexy Martin Riggs anymore. Like, it's fucking weird, you know. Or like if he came back from Mad Max, we'd be like, that's kind of like Mad Max is a great example.
that's a great example.
Time has been passed. You can just pass it on the. No one was complaining.
And they go, he's kind of Max, and then we just go with it. You know?
But like,
That's a good movie.
But Stallone, we've seen like everyone doubted him with Rocky Balboa, and then when he did it, you're like, okay, never mind, do whatever you want, because that's the thing with how we work with like what's the audience's association with that actor today. Yep. I feel like Men in Black. The reason we can move past it is because no one cares about Tommy Lee Jones. Will Smith, we would have cared about. But Bad Boys is like, no, that's different because we know that they can still do that. You know?
And it's very them. Like, that movie still works. Bad Boys 1 and 2 still work because of Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, and you need that with a third one. Like, those movies work because of them.
Yeah, like if we know they can, I think that's, after all this talk, I feel like that's what if we know those actors can still do it, then you bring them back. And I feel like it's that simple, really. If we know they're still capable of doing it, you bring them back. If we know they're not, then go ahead, move on with, like, I wouldn't want to see Sean Connery play Bond again. Like,
no, God, no.
Oh,
and please, Bruce Willis, don't come back as John McClane. I just don't care.
No. Let's get an Expendables going of actors who should not return to old roles and make that, because that would be spectacular. You get a Sean Connery Bond in there. You can get Mel Gibson in his rigs. You know?
I feel like you could get fucking Antonio Banderas to play Zorro.
Yeah,
they should have done that a long time ago.
They could do a third Zorro.
They should, and
It would be the reboot of The Mask of Zorro, where he's passing down the mantle again.
hey, that's not the worst idea. Get Diego Luna to take over.
Yeah,
there you go.
Oscar Isaac as the bad guy.
Yeah.
All right, I'd watch that.
Yeah, I'd watch it too.
Someone contact us.
All right, guys. Well, what's your thoughts on this? Did you stay till the end of this? Jesus. All right.
How long have we been going,
It's a
man?
long time.
Sorry.
You guys can subscribe to the Reject Nation. Please click that notification bell and check us out on Patreon. PJ Campbell, go check out the PJ Campbell show as soon as you can. It's free to listen to. Check out my episode over there. And last but not least, Michael B. Thank you so much for requesting this, my homie. I love you so much. You're so lovely. Michael, I'm going to write you up a file. You give me nothing. You give me the opposite of bile.
This conversation was definitely worthwhile.
That's right, Michael. We're not in denial of how much you remind me of my friend Lyle.
Oh, Lyle's a good guy, so that's a great compliment.
When I call you, I don't get a phone dial.
Thanks for the request. You're the best. Send another one next month. We'll do it with much.
Stay pledged to our Patreon so we can get these podcasts on.
You're gonna help out. This is a
Fight, PJ.
I'm so sorry, guys. I can't do it. I'm sorry.
hype us up or something.
I can't do it.
I can't do it. I'm sorry. I'm white. I'm sorry.
I'm white too. It's no
I'm
excuse.
30% according to my DNA ancestry results.
Michael, we love you. Thank you so much. You are an eloquent individual, and we love you.
Go check out his channel. See you guys.
Woo.